Hello, Juanita. I'm Felicia Gibson. Thank you so much for accepting to have this interview. As I said, I'm the CEO of PACS. PACS stands for Profile Assessment and Goal Setting. It's an assessment tool designed for educators to help them in helping students with special educational needs. That's what we do. We work with schools in the UK, UAE, and Belgium, and internationally. Alongside our work, we have also been involved in leading an autism spectrum, an Erasmus project called Autism Spectrum Pathways. And this interview is about launching our exciting YouTube video series that aims to explore basically and share the experiences and perspectives of employers, vocational educational trainers, and autistic people in relation to training and employment. Opportunities for those on the autistic spectrum. So we are basically, what we aim to do in this project is we are dedicated to creating these smoother transitions from study to work for individuals on autistic spectrum. And in this circumstance, we believe that your insight and experiences, as many, will be invaluable to them, and also will be honored if this contribution will be featured in this video series, and also will have international and European media exposure. So I'm going to now, sorry, long introduction, but needed is because it's part of the people to know who we are. Could you please introduce yourself for people to understand what you do and who you are?
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Juanita de Villiers. I'm a genderqueer autistic adult, late diagnosed. Currently, I'm seeking employment, but I have been employed in the past. I'm also diagnosed with ADHD, as many of us are. But my training is in English literature. So I've worked in various sort of content writing and publication roles.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, and also the experience that you already have in school, going through the schooling system, basically. So I'm gonna have some going to your journey, because we just spoke before. Can you share a little bit of your experience of finding a job first?
Oh, wow. It's really difficult. The postings often don't seem to make a lot of sense in terms of the criteria. It's not clear why, for example, an entry-level job has 3 years experience necessary. I never know based on my CV because it's quite eclectic, shall we say, whether or not I can apply for a role. And people will use terms like transferable skills, highlight transferable skills, but I never know how to do that. That sounds abstract. And then I actually, unlike quite a few autistic people, I actually find I do quite all right in the interview stage. I feel like I have the script for that down, but I struggle to get there. I really struggle with cover letters, and the entire sort of employment market seems to increasingly, under late stage capitalism, be a series of jobs that are being strung out into 40-hour work weeks that could be done in a couple of days, and you have to pretend that you care about pointless work in order to get a job, in order to afford the necessities to live. So yeah, it's been very difficult. And increasingly I'm demotivated because typically what will happen is I will start on a job and I will seem to take longer than others to adjust to the work. And I typically can't hold on to a job for more than a year before I end up being either pushed out or having to quit because of burnout.
All right. So, thank you so much, and I understand this painful experience as well. Going through this interview process? You said that the message is not clear, the letter covers are not clear. Let's take one issue at a time. I would say,
Yeah.
did you, like for instance, did you inform the organization when you apply for the interview for
I
this job?
usually do.
You do.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
do.
you
Um,
inform them about your diagnosis, and how do they respond when they found that?
um, Usually there's sort of the rote thing of, okay, well, we encourage diversity or something to that effect, but they never really have a plan in place for neurodiverse employees, and the managers are never trained on anything to do with that, so they bring their assumptions of what will be helpful and what won't into the space, or they don't realize that every autistic person's profile is unique, so they they fail to understand why, for example, we can have sort of spotty skills. Like when I say I have good attention to detail and then I make errors, that seems inconsistent to them, but it's that I will focus in on one thing and then the other stuff doesn't register. So they will take that as a sign that I don't care, or yeah. So there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, and I think it falls on the autistic employees a lot of the time to explain what that means and what accommodations they might need, and to educate their own employers and managers, when I feel like that should be standard of being a people manager, is to have some training on this sort of thing.
Thank you for sharing that, because one of the things that we have just released is our employment guide. Is based on research on European countries, obviously, which would be very useful for the human resource managers to have a look. And then I think it's really, really well organized with all this accommodation that could be done for employees when they have and they disclose themselves that they have a condition. So if we take step by step the interview for the process, first you have to scroll down to find the job. How do you find that part of filtering what job will be important to me, then applying for that job? Could you a little bit
I find
explain
that
on that process?
incredibly confusing. So
Yes.
I'll look on job boards like LinkedIn and such, and half the time I I feel like they're a jumble of buzzwords rather than a description of an actual job. And there's so much subtext that you're supposed to read into it, like a fast-paced environment, meaning, everyone's overworked, or wear multiple hats, meaning you'll be expected to perform the job of three people but be paid the salary of one. And there's so little transparency because everyone wants to pretend that their company culture is great. So they'll give you a paragraph about how wonderful it is that you'll have the honor of working for them, as though it's not a transactional relationship, without actually telling you anything about the job until that you hit the list of requirements that is so long that I feel like I can't apply for anything because I don't feel like I meet any requirements. But then when I talk to my friends, they'll explain the job listing to me and how I do in fact meet it. So I think corporate jargon in general, it's kind of nonsense speak a lot of the time. And there've been studies on this, on the sort of creation of a language around corporate environments in particular, that actually uses a lot of words to say nothing but creates a false air of purpose and importance, that if you buy into it, congratulations, you're more likely to succeed, but if you can't buy into it, you're kind of doomed.
Okay, so what are you saying? That you're saying that the to find a job, um, it is challenging to understand the message and what is required, because there's lots of things in there, but that doesn't say about the job. Then you feel that it's also challenging for yourself to match what is required in the job to your existing skills. And then
Exactly.
and Okay, so that is one aspect of filtering what is the job that will fit my skills and knowledge that I have. And then the second part is, let's say that, for instance, this part is done. What do you think? Where do you think that you said that you have been employed? Where do you think that the employers doing the interviews? Where do you think the employers could have done better? Where what kind of structure should the interview have for you to feel more comfortable
Um,
and to be more inclusive?
yeah, I think that job interviews in general are difficult for people because people ask a question that shields the actual question. So if they ask you something like, "What is a time where, you know, you a project didn't go right?" If you tell them a time the project didn't go right, that's not the answer they want. They want how you solved it, and they want you to come across as proactive and problem solving and all of these things. They don't actually ask questions that are what they want to know. There's this kind of weird script that happens in job interviews. Um, I know for a lot of people, getting the questions beforehand can be good. I generally like to know how many phases of an interview process there will be. I get really annoyed when there's a sort of test task that you're not compensated for, because if I'm giving my time and doing labor that by all accounts you could take and then use, then I should be compensated for that. Um, but yeah, I think that the entire way that we do interviews, where there's this kind of strange seeing if the personality fits by way of sort of roundabout questions, doesn't make any sense. And there are definitely wrong answers. um, but that you can't, for example, if someone says, "Why do you want this job?" You can't be honest and say, "I don't particularly, but it's available and I need to earn money. I don't really care about car insurance," or whatever the thing is. You have to come up with some, can I swear? You have
No.
to Okay, you have
Yeah.
to come up with some nonsense about how you're passionate about content creation and innovation or something, and insert a bunch of buzzwords that don't mean anything, so that you can get a job that nobody really wants. So that, the
Yeah,
whole
but
process is a bit of an acting gig, really. They're trying to convince you that you want the job, and you're trying to convince them that you can not only do the job, but that you somehow deeply care about this company that you probably heard of for the first time when you saw their post on LinkedIn and then did a quick research of them. And I don't understand why there has to be all this emotional labor around it, when you can't just say, "Hey, I write well, you need someone who writes well, problem solved."
yes, this is great because I was you just highlighted what the some of your strengths that you would like to highlight in the future's interview. So I think this is great, Juanita, honestly, to share this information, to share this experience, because if your messaging is clear, maybe some other employers will actually understand. Well, if I want a person who writes
Mm,
well, there you go. Yeah. And
mm,
like for instance, you said that you have passed this page phase of the
mm.
going through the interview, and then you disclose your diagnosis. Have you found the employers actually knowledgeable and understanding about autism? Because you
No,
said no, and
not not once in my experience.
not once. Okay, so what do you think that the employer understands? What do you think that the employer understands from autism? How?
um I think that I'm not entirely sure, to be perfectly
Yes.
honest.
Mm.
It's unclear what they think. I think that they think that because I'm quite low supports needs, that maybe I don't really have this, or they think that I'm not really sure what they think, to be perfectly honest, because they always seem surprised when autistic employees behave autistically. So,
Okay, so let me rephrase that. I said, would you share from your point of view, because this is
uh,
your experience, would you share some any strategy or support that have helped you to find and keep a job?
okay.
Yeah.
Um, the ones that I've been able to maintain for longer,
Yeah.
generally flexible working hours have been very important. Um, Sort of an attitude of I don't care how many hours you log as long as the work gets done. Because some days I can do like several days work in 4 hours, and then some days it takes me a week to do something that they tell me should take an hour. But, I then have a timesheet that expects me to track 8 hours. So I either have to lie and say that the 4 hours worth of productivity was 8 hours, or and I don't want to do that. I don't like to lie, but I also realize that everybody in jobs is lying all of the time, and that makes me uncomfortable because people always fudge their timesheets, for example, or say they love their job on Slack when they don't, so that gets confusing. Sorry, that's another thing. I think also having sort of emails that have like a summary of what you need to take away from it at the end has always been really helpful, and not having meetings that come up out of the blue with no agenda and will just say like manager your name, because I immediately think, oh, I'm getting fired. That's what's happening now. And then that anxiety takes a really long time for us to wind down from. That'll take my entire day away from me. Whereas for somebody else, maybe once they find out that's not the case, they're fine. I will need the rest of the day to emotionally regulate, and you've just destroyed any chance I have of being productive. So I think that's something. Working remotely is incredibly important for me, um, because it just gives me much more control. People always think that accommodations for autism equals headphones, and while headphones are great, simple things like I sometimes struggle to get dressed in the morning. Sometimes I really struggle with the textures of like real clothes, office appropriate wear. Whereas when I work remotely, I can be in pajamas or sweatpants, and that is a huge thing. I can control how much light is in the room. I can control, you know, multiple things. And I also don't have to deal with transport, which can be very overwhelming, taking public transport to and from work, or having to pay for something like an Uber, which is too expensive. It's just it's a very necessary thing for a lot of people, I think. And then another thing I think is sort of people think that they're being clear in when they give you a task, but that they're not. And I don't really know, I'm not an expert. I don't know how to bridge that gap, but people will say something and then you'll do something and it's not how they expected you to do that. And because you're now confused, they'll say, oh, well, if you were confused, you should have asked. When that's not what's happening. I wasn't confused. I thought I understood the brief and I did what I thought you wanted. I am now confused. So I think people overestimate how clear they are in communication. Yeah.
Do you think that communication is the major issue?
I think it's one of them. I definitely think it's one of them. Um, like there's so much subtext in sort of work environments. Nobody says outright what they mean. They say something adjacent, um, more so than even in everyday environments. And I often feel like there's like, I don't know, there's this front-facing dialogue that happens, and then there's what's actually happening. And that tension can be incredibly anxiety-inducing as well.
Yeah, I can understand that and totally empathize. It's difficult to map out, but at the same time, we have to find a way of educating the companies to make this accommodation, because there's a lot of potential there. And from what you already expressed, you can write well, you can do things with a lightning speed. You can take sometimes longer to do a task, but this is how you regulate your own zone to be able to cope with all this, and then all this overwhelming sensory and stimuli that it can come, and then block sometimes cognitively. So that this is really important what you shared in here. And I would like for the audience as well, because I'm hoping that many people will watch this video, is just what advice would you give to the companies that are looking to support autistic workers? Because our message really has to come clear in the community. There is so much there that we can offer from your side. What advice you would give to the companies that are looking?
I mean, I'll be honest, I'm quite cynical about the state of employment from most companies. But I think realize that the first person who discloses their autism to you is not the first autistic worker you've had, most likely. That employee who started off strong and then had to leave, or whatever the case may be. You know, where there's this sort of thinking that when one person discloses, you then need to provide some sort of special accommodations for them, but most of the accommodations that help us help everyone. I think the other thing is you are not, as a company, a trained professional in the world of neurodivergence, and you need to recognize that. You wanting to do right by your autistic employees is lovely, and you reading maybe a couple blog posts on it is very kind, if they even bother to do that, because a lot don't. But you need an external eye or appropriate training. And I think also look at ways that you are taking on an autistic employee and then expecting them to behave the same way as a non-autistic employee. Our markers of professionalism are different. The way that we regulate our hours are different. All of these things are different, and you signed up for that when you hired an autistic employee. Your payoff is whatever skills we bring to the space, but you did sign up to have an employee with massive cognitive differences from yourself, most likely, because I remember there was a study out of the UK that found that something like 80% of working age autistic adults were unemployed, and of that 20% that were employed, a minor percent of them were in middle or above roles. We tend to remain in lower roles, even though another study out of Germany showed that we tend to have a higher level of education and more degrees. We tend not to make our way up in the workforce. And actually, that's another thing that I think is very important, is not everyone wants to be a manager, and not everyone should be a manager. There need to be more career pathways for people that are not becoming a people manager. Because first of all, people managers are often people who get into that position not because they have any skill in HR or training or development, but because they did the job well, which often positions them poorly to actually teach someone how to do the job because it came more naturally to them. And then in terms of, as an autistic employee, if there's no room for growth for me that doesn't involve a management track, that's personally not something I want. And that can be incredibly demotivating.
Wow. Wow, Juanita, thank you so much for sharing your challenges, experience. What kind of job are you looking currently now?
Currently, I'm looking. I'm doing freelance SEO optimization work, which it's fine. It's money in the bank, so to speak. But I really do enjoy content research the most. The best job that I ever had was as a researcher for a novelist. There would be a topic that she needed to understand. I would do research on it, I would break it down, and I would give her the information that she needed in order to write. And I loved that. But I'm also applying to go back and finish my master's in English literature, because I had to drop out of it, unfortunately, because of mental health difficulties. And I'm now in a position where I think I'd be able to finish it. So yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at.
Well, Juanita, thank you so much, and success with your master's.
Thank you.
How much is left with less? couple of months, a
Well,
year, or a semester?
I'm just applying now, so it would be a 2-year master by dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to look at contemporary Gothic literature and the way that fungus functions in it as a representation of consumption. So yeah.
Wow, that's super interesting. Wow, Juanita, it is incredible. I hope this interview is going to help a lot of people, especially the employers and what accommodation they will need to understand better, to read and inform themselves from the autism employment guide. It's not the autism employment guide, but it's an employment guide. And if any information you would like to, further, because we will be publishing the training modules as well, and the map that will be all the important agency that will be hosting and helping individuals on autistic spectrum to find jobs. That will be, I think, will be very, very useful. Our website is for this project is called autism-spectrum-pathways.eu. So all that information is there. I put it also in chat, so for you to have a look, and then perhaps, for instance, if you apply for any job, let's say, go and have a look in there. This is an employment guide. The employment guide was really is accessible in 5 languages, and it is with a mind of educating the employers how to make this. But at the same time, we're going to have the training modules that will help individuals like yourself. What do I need extra to do to actually keep my job? So what accommodation I need to make myself to be able, what strategies I need to employ, and going through that training model, I think would be very interesting for yourself and to give us feedback. It will be published very soon. Just keep on an eye on the website, also on the map, and any other, for instance, any other things that we will be publishing, we will let you know. When the interview is ready, we'll send you the link, and that will be on the media. Thank you so much again, and I will stop the recording now.